Welcome to the Media Roundtable Special Edition, where we dive deep into the secrets of the craft of audio advertising and provide our perspective on industry topics in service of the Chief Audio Officer. That is that special person who is dedicated and responsible for the success of their audio campaign. We had a big week last week. The world had a big week last week, but we had a particularly big week because we had so many chief audio officers all gathered together here in Los Angeles for our Chief Audio Officer Summit, which is now an annual event. By the way, I am your host, Dan Granger, CEO and founder of Oxford Road. So let me just give you a little bit of background, and then you'll be really excited to hear who we have with us today. So the point of the Chief Audio Officer event and events really is to bring together those that are at the top of the food chain in the audio business, because I think what happens is those of us that are working in the business of audio, a lot of times we come up with our best ideas, and especially from the publishing side, standards, practices, ways of doing business kind of get pushed out onto the industry, and then we all have to react to that. But one of the things we're trying to do is create a community so that the end user, the ultimate marketer responsible for the channel has a voice and has a community and a tribe that they can connect with to share best practices, understand how they're dealing with new dynamics in the marketplace, get to know each other, and have, a lifeline to call anytime that's needed. And to the extent possible, to send messages to the broader industry to say, look, this is what we want. These are the challenges we're having. And so that new solutions can be developed according to your needs. So that's really the point. I think it was, we got astounding feedback the first time we did this. It was just a concept. And then last year we had about 50 marketers come out. And when we sent out our kind of NPS surveys, we had about a 93% satisfaction rate, saying that that's how many people said they would recommend somebody else to come in the future. This year, I think we actually were able to outdo it. We had a wonderful, wonderful group of people assembled who just really brought a voice to the conversation. I heard a lot of people saying it was so nice to know that we're not alone and we're not the only ones struggling with some of these things. And I think there was just a lot of knowledge shared and a lot of knowledge gained, and hopefully a little bit of fun. I know based on the number of people that got sick this week, we think it must have, everybody got really close and had a good time together. So we actually have assembled an all-star panel of chief audio officers who were at the event, who have agreed to come on and share, for those of you that have missed it, some of the lessons that they went home with. And so the first person I want to welcome to the show is Haynes, who's brand manager at blinds.com, which is a Home Depot company. Welcome, May. Next, I want to welcome Brynn Greenelsh, who is marketing manager at Auctane. If you're not familiar with Auctane, you're probably familiar with one of the brands that advertises in audio on behalf of Auctane, and that might be stamps.com or ShipStation. Welcome, Brynn. Glad to have you with us. And then we have Dominic Palombo. Dominic is our friend from Caldera Labs. He is Senior Partnerships Manager, and this was his second time coming out to the event. Welcome, Dom. Thanks for being with us today. And to round things out, we have James Ingrassia, who is EVP of Client Services. And if you listen to the show, you've probably heard James here before. So welcome, everybody. I just want to say thank you for making the time. Thanks for sitting through that long intro. And I just want to start out with just a jump ball question. What was your experience coming to the event, and what did you leave with? And if it's okay, Brynn, I'll put you on the spot first. Tell us about last week and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so I came out of it with a little bit of a cold, but I also came out of it with some new friends and new contacts, and I think a renewed excitement about podcast advertising. This was my first CAO summit, so I really didn't know what to expect. And I was blown away. It was so much fun. I learned a lot. I definitely came out of it with like I said, some renewed excitement, but also some solidarity, and knowing that I am not the only person dealing with some of the struggles that I am.
You are not alone. You are
Yeah.
not alone. I'm glad it had the desired effect. May, let's jump to you next. Any big takeaways and reactions from the event?
Yeah, definitely. So this was my first summit as well, like Brynn, and I will say mind blown. I felt so honored to be in a room full of other chief audio officers and like Brynn, like learn the struggles that I face on a daily. And I'm like, am I the only one seeing this in my world? But also gaining that knowledge on podcasting as well. I've dealt a lot with podcasting in my past. So just being in the room with all these media gurus and giants was amazing. I would rate it 1,000 out of 10, guys, literally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Love it. Okay. This is good. This is good. Now we just need you to rate the Media Roundtable podcast in iTunes while you're feeling that type of enthusiasm. Dom, let's go to you. And you have the knowledge of what our first shot at this was. So how did it stack up for you?
Yeah, it's Dan and James, you guys know, and Haley. You guys know how much fun I had at it last year. First time there, and I don't work with Oxford Road, as you guys know, but just being able to meet, like Brynn, you hit it on the head, just meeting new contacts and people in the industry. I think that's probably my favorite part, and just the transparency between people in one-on-ones, whether it's the Thursday night when we get there, or Wednesday night, excuse me, when we get there, or Thursday night at the after party, and just where people are a little bit more loose, you really get to talk and hear from everyone and see, yeah, what their issues are, what their solutions to everything is, and just kind of how they're thinking. And yeah, just what people are saying is really cool, and just keeping up to date with the industry, because as Miranda mentioned quite a few times in her session, just the industry from last year's summit to this year's is night and day. So the industry is changing quick. So things like this really help us all kind of stay up to date and keep it going.
Dom, that's an interesting point worth calling out, is just the contrast in the industry between where things were a year ago. I mean, I think we're kind of getting used to the change, right? Because I think if you go back 12 months and then 12 months before that and 12 months before that, at least through this pandemic, you've got an industry that is in a massive state of flux. And if we can, I'd love to come back to that topic. James, I'd love to hear from you, having been working on the inside of this thing through all the planning and everything else. What did you take away?
I took away, I got a lot of candid feedback just throughout the event, and texts and emails that night and the next day and over the weekend. And two words stood out, and almost everyone's messages to me were informative and fun. And while fun is nice to have, but I think it's an important thing to note that this was not a boring session after session after session of things that you're looking at or watching and can't wait to get out of there. I also heard there was a big variety of topics that we covered, from welcome receptions to keynotes to fireside chats to panels to case studies, and the variety was something that people enjoyed, and they also enjoyed each other's company. I think usually when you go to industry events, everyone's a little bit standoffish, but at an event like this, I definitely saw the walls come down and everyone was best friends by the end of it, which was really nice to see.
Yeah, it's so amazing, and it's always so surreal for me, because somehow I've got like 2 decades of relationships that get represented in the room. Some people I've just met recently, and some people literally we go back decades. And it's so fun to see people that I've known for a long time getting to know somebody else for the first time, and just watching all these worlds collide in a way that's really collaborative. So I think, first of all, the value of community is important. And I think the value of assembly is, because I think we're all pretty invested in this space, and we just want to make it better. And so I think that can't happen if we don't have a unified community of people representing the business side of it. We're all kind of on the other end of it, and I think we have a lot we can do together. So what I'd like to do is go through some of the events and some of the sessions, and just ask you guys to fill in anything that stood out to you about those, and we'll share our thoughts as well. So we kicked off on Wednesday night in the nicely refurbished Cinegrill Theater at the Roosevelt Hotel. And we got to hear from a few different voices in addition to mine. We had, by popular demand, we had Brittany Clevenger. And the interesting thing about Brittany is, everybody knows about BetterHelp because they are really spending circles around everybody else. And also they have a great program that they run. You hear their ads, you see the way that they have, I think, transformed the way people think about mental health simply by recruiting all of these influencers to go and say, yeah, I do this. Yeah, I do this. And, we got to hear about some of the impact of that. We also got to hear from Ashley Flowers. Ashley is not only the host of Crime Junkie, but she's the CEO of a increasingly large organization called Audio Chuck. And one of the things that stood out to me so much with Ashley is just how she's using this canvas of sound to be able to solve crimes and bring forth justice in the real world. She mentioned that there are like 10 cold cases that they have solved just through a podcast. And you think about people that go into, the work of solving crimes for a living, like it's hard to stack up to Ashley Flowers, who is a podcaster. So I thought that was a really interesting view of the impact that the channel can have and just wielding this tool that is sound. And then finally, we had, courtesy of Pineapple Street and Odyssey, Jenna Weiss-Berman came up with Dana Carvey and David Spade, who are the hosts of the Fly on the Wall podcast, which, if nothing else, was a nice bit of a comedic break. But it was interesting because, these are guys that have been in very successful movies at the box office, TV shows, both SNL. These are legendary comedians who have worked across media, and just to consider why they would choose a podcast as the right platform for them. I think that speaks volumes in and of itself. So what else happened in our welcome reception that stood out for you guys?
I'll go first. I'll say that I was super excited because me and Brittany go way back from our agency days. So to just see her on that stage and speak to what she truly loves and what we're both passionate about was great. And what stood out for me was just her reference of how the podcasting world is helping people with their mental health. And we know that's such a bigger thing in today's society. And I just truly enjoyed her giving those snippets of how they have seen like increases or the different podcasts that she utilizes to get that messaging around that BetterHelp is here for your needs through actually using audio ads. So that was my biggest key takeaway that truly like had a great impact on me.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to hear her talk about the change in the stigma around mental health support, right? And I think we saw that corroborated the next day with Mayim Bialik, not to jump too far ahead, but it's like this is a bit of a movement, and I think audio's been playing a big part in that. So it's wonderful not just to see entertainment and not just to see ad campaigns, but to see ones that are actually changing things culturally in what I view as a positive way. So I thought that was really cool. Dom, how about you? Anything from the welcome?
Yeah, I thought Brittany, I mean, she's the best. So that was always great to hear from her. But I thought Ashley said something pretty cool, especially given the true crime nature where they're talking about some pretty heavy stuff, how Audio Chuck builds around ad breaks in less heavy spots for one, so the brand's not afraid of having a murder in the story happen and then their friendly ad occur, but just that care to detail and drive really to make the ad buying experiences for a brand better, and then for the listening experience for her audience. That was really cool, and just likening that from an industry perspective, because I don't really work with true crime shows and haven't in my days at Manscaped to Caldera, but just other shows of understanding on the timing side of things, just being better, like the Oxford clock you guys talked about, just getting better about where ads should be, and how she was so meticulous with that and how she wanted to be at the sessions, and seeing her at the sessions was pretty cool as a podcaster to want to learn. So that was pretty enlightening to see for my perspective as a brand.
Well, and you guys, I mean, you get to see all different types of creators, right? And it's validating to see that the success Ashley has seen correlates with how seriously she takes the craft, right? We all saw during the pandemic a billion celebrities just pour in, and they started their podcast and they'd chat with their friends and then they go do something else, right? But what we're seeing now is a lot of the people that were easy come, easy go have since gone or are in the process of going. But the ones that are really durable are the ones that are like Ashley, that care enough to think about the placement of their ad breaks to optimize the listening experience. And every creator can do that. Many choose not to. So it was really, to me, wonderful to see a true master of the craft who's taking every detail seriously. And so glad to hear you call that out. Brynn, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said. The fact that Ashley put so much care and thought into every detail of how she created her podcast, I think really goes to show that, you know, an ad, whether we like it or not, is as much a part of the podcast as the content is. Maybe not the most important part, but it is still a part of the podcast. And you have to be thoughtful about how you approach it. And I thought that Ashley, the way that she spoke about that was really wonderful. But I also think, like you were saying, Dan, how Brittany and BetterHelp have helped to lift the stigma around mental health purely through podcast ads. I mean, I know it because I know how my thoughts about BetterHelp and therapy changed from hearing it on podcasts all the time. And then, of course, Ashley's out here solving murders. It's like the influence that podcasting can have is insane. And that was my biggest takeaway, was just how influential podcasting can be.
Here. And that was really the purpose of the theme. We have the three themes of purpose, profit, and people. And our welcome reception, we tried to lean on, how do you use this platform for good, right? And they were just such perfect candidates to tell that story, right? James, what did we miss from our welcome reception?
I thought it was really interesting. Now, when we go to New York and we do the pop-up CAO events, the New York contingent seems to all know each other really well at this point, and they bring their friends and family in the CAO world. But I was surprised at this one of how many CAOs knew each other, didn't know that each other were coming, and had a little reunions. And I thought that was really interesting to see, whether it was like May and Brittany from a CAO to a client, or whether it was CAO to CAO, who used to work together, who got someone else another job, who used to work with someone else. And it was just great to kind of see that community all taking place right in front of our eyes. So that was a real takeaway for me for the welcome reception.
We've seen a few great buddy teams from across different companies coming together, where there's usually somebody that's mentoring the other, and just watching that in real life is pretty cool. Okay, so let's get down to business. The main event for the summit was held. The first night was at the Roosevelt, and that was sponsored by Seeker, which is a brand safety and suitability tool that we're very much engaged with. But the daytime event on Thursday was really the main event, because that was where we were getting down to strategies and tactics, and a lot of research and updates about the industry and how we do business, right? And that's where we had a lot of panels of fellow CAOs talking about measurement, creative, audio's place in the marketing mix, things like that. We also revealed a statistic that I probably should have teased at the top of this episode, which was that we had 30% of the podcast industry, at least the US podcast industry, it represented in one room, which is kind of staggering to think about. I have never been to an event that had that much share of the market sitting together, kind of talking to each other. So, just by virtue of who was there, I think there was meaning. But in terms of the actual content, I want to start with kind of the main presentation that was made in three parts, which was about the state of audio advertising. And I want to ask you guys the question because I think we probably could all come away with some different ideas about it, but hopefully some common themes. What is the state of audio advertising as best as you were able to conclude from everything that was presented? And I'll start with you on this one, Dom.
Yeah, I'd say for like my kind of current situation, I helped lead the influencer program, YouTube program, like podcast program as well. So I think really audio, just the influence, like Brynn, you were hitting on its influence has probably never been better, and just the industry, the authenticity throughout it, and people like all those celebrities that started podcasts, some of them aren't going anymore. So I feel like if you're still going, you kind of made it past that wall, that you kind of realized either this isn't for me or, yep, this is my thing. And I'm going to really try to build it and do it the right way. So I think these days, just like I talk to people in the industry, like I view podcasts as influencers now, and that's why I love when we do a podcast and we add social in there, because it really is, their audience is everywhere. People trust them in both sides of it. So that was the biggest thing, just the key, like authenticity. I took a screenshot. Authenticity is the North Star from your guys' presentation. So like I look at that big time, and that was definitely my big takeaway of current state of audio.
Well, one of the things we've been pretty deliberate about in the messaging that we facilitated, right? And this is something we try to repeat with all of the publishers and our partners on the creator side, is just that there is so much momentum behind automation right now, which, like, of course we want automation. Who doesn't want automation, right? But the challenge is that the more you automate, you start to get away from that authenticity. And so I feel like gravity is pulling us in a different direction. For that room, the significance of 30% getting in one room, you really have, I think, the majority of interest in a room, because the people that take the time to come to an event like this are obviously engaged. This is not just a box that's being checked for most people that show up to something like this. It was staggering to me how many people really, like you just shared, Dom, value the personal relationships and the authenticity of the reads and the reads by host. But if you're buying programmatically, which, you know, we're doing, it's part of the mix, but it's an increasing part of the mix. You really can't do a personal endorsement. You really can't have that authentic. There is no onboarding for that, right? And so as the industry is organizing around efficiency and things that big brands can use, but not necessarily hold accountable in the same ways that many of us do, it's a bit of a threat. So, you know, while technological evolution benefits our lives greatly, there are also things that can be lost, like, you know, phones and kids going outside, like things. There's two sides of the coin, right? And we really have to be heads up about how much we're being taken in a direction that we may not intend to go as buyers. So really, really helpful thing to call out. Brynn, how about you? State of audio, any observation, reaction, anything on that?
Yeah, I was sitting here trying to think of the right word to kind of encapsulate it all. And in my opinion, I think it would be, the state of audio is that it's maturing, right? It's growing, but it's not like the wild, wild west anymore. Like its frontal lobe is a little bit more developed, and there's tools that we can use now, like Seeker, like Podscribe. You know, we're starting to figure it out and really nail it down. But there's, of course, you know, still opportunities for growth. And, you know, to your guys' point about authenticity and and what comes along with host endorsements, and then, you know, programmatic, you can get goodness out of both. And we're still trying to figure out the right mix, and that's for each brand, but we're getting there. We're maturing.
We are indeed. We're growing up.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
growing up. May, how about you?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was thinking, Brynn. I was over here like the state of audio is continually to evolve. I know when I first started in the industry, we were nowhere near where we are now with the tracking and the more influential. And I think it was like a percentage that was given about how many consumers truly believe and trust in their podcaster that they listen to, versus when I started off in podcasting, it just was like, oh, I'm going to listen to this. That's it. I heard an ad here and there, but now, as consumers, we truly believe in these people, and it's just evolving continuously, especially with the tracking. That I remember starting, there was no such thing as tracking or pixelating. So to be at this point, I can imagine 5 years from now where we'll be with audio. So
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think of. I mean, we started dabbling in 2011 and opened the agency in 2013. And, impressions weren't even a variable at the time. I mean, technically they're still not. Like, the industry doesn't like to talk about it a lot, but we don't really use impressions. We don't really know what impressions are. We have these download proxies, and every time somebody talks about the iOS change, I'm like, wait till they find out that they still don't know the impressions. But no, it's changing drastically. And, we were talking earlier about how different things even are from 12 months ago. And 12 months ago, the order of the day was to be opportunistic and grab deals, because there was a lot of inventory coming out of the pandemic that was going unsold, right? And so the idea of, we will get pressure. All of us will get pressure from the marketplace to say, oh, you need to book your upfronts. You need to lay it in, or you're not going to be able to access this inventory. Well, the sellers always say that, and it doesn't always mean that it's the case. Sometimes it is better in some environments to hold back more because you know that prices are going to drop. Well, a year ago, that was the case. Today, it is quite different. There is a lot of pressure, specifically in podcasts, right? We're not really talking a lot about streaming and radio, where I think you have more inventory. But in podcasts specifically, there is a lot of pressure on that inventory. And so whereas our guidance a year ago may have been, sit back and keep your powder dry, today it's like, no, you really do need to plan up front. You really do need to make sure you lock up those performers, because in this environment, you can't afford to have it get sold out before you get there. So, the tactics need to change, the strategies need to change, and we need to keep paying attention and listening to the market so we can continue to evolve. James, I'll give you the last word on this one, and I'm going to give you the first word on the next one. So you've been so patient so far.
I think everyone hit the nail on the head. Audio is, some of it's hard. It's under construction. It's constantly evolving. And just when you think you understand it, some curveball comes into it. So I do think that we covered a lot of ground in that world on stage through panels, through keynotes, through case studies. And then I think next year, even if we were to rerun those same exact programming pieces, all the content would be different. So I think that it's a good way to say, like, it's constantly evolving and always changing.
Okay, pop quiz. Have you ever heard of these companies? Shopify, Bayer, Oracle, Indeed, Masterclass, Babbel, Tommy John. We could go on. I don't just host the Media Roundtable podcast, but I have the good fortune of being the CEO of a company called Oxford Road, where we are the world's leading independently owned and operated agency specializing in audio. Think podcasts, radio, and streaming. And what that means is that we get to help great companies worth fighting for, grow with audio advertising, whether it's podcasts, radio, or streaming, and all its various tentacles. This includes media planning and buying. We do analytics, attribution, and insights. We also have a special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. It's our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. Bottom line is, we don't just work here. Audio is our passion, and we want to lead this industry to new heights beyond what we've ever seen so far. That's why we've been leading the industry in brand safety and suitability, and actually bringing you solutions to market so that you can evaluate the way that you get placed in a show so that it matches up with your values, in addition to avoiding the things that might be problematic for your brand. If you're a chief audio officer and you're looking to get best in market performance at maximum viable scale, do get in touch with us at oxfordroad.com. Or if you love audio and are strategic, relentless, and looking for a career change, consider joining our mission as a fellow agent of influence. Just flip us your resume through oxfordroad.com. And if you're working anywhere in the audio industry and you're serious about this business, make sure you go to oxfordroad.com. Easy to spell. Sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer, at oxfordroad.com. And make sure you mention that you heard about us on the Media Roundtable podcast. Understood. Okay, so James, the first panel that we did coming out of the State of Audio keynote was about audio's place in the marketing mix. So from you had maybe 4 different CAOs speaking on that panel. What did you get out of that? What did you learn from that conversation?
I learned that even though I had 4 CAOs on the panel, all from drastically different worlds, different categories. There was zero overlap in the 4 businesses. We had Bayer Pharmaceuticals, we had DraftKings sports betting, we had LifeLock, the online security, and we had Shopify e-commerce. And they all, during a lot of our prep sessions, had very similar thoughts, but then as they actually went to market, they all had different uses for audio and its different channels, which I thought was really interesting in that approach. What I did learn that they did all seem to have the same view on was podcasts are not podcasts the way that they were defined 20 years ago, which is one of the videos I showed on screen with Steve Jobs introducing podcasting in 2005, almost 20 years ago, and referring to it as TiVo for radio, and the hottest thing in radio. So it was all about just taking audio and being able to pause it and listen to it on demand was the original intent of podcasting. And fast forward to now, 20 years later, it's video podcasts. Sometimes it's video only. Sometimes it's only on X or Twitter. Sometimes it's only on TikTok or Snapchat. But all those things are called podcasts. But the one thing that all the panelists had in common was that they really didn't see any difference with it being there. They just saw that as a way and means to reach their customer. And you can call it a podcast, you can call it a video, but it was really the host endorsement that was the true common thread between all of that. So that's what I thought was really interesting there. So it made it tough to secure audio budgets, which I think was something that they all had different answers to. But in terms of using that channel as a means to reach people, they all saw it as an evolution of the original podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And we're still having debates in this industry about what is a podcast and how do we define it, right? And who knows, maybe that'll be something we put forth next year and see if we can get everybody to align on a definition, and that'll be what it is. Dom, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I think how James, you mentioned how each brand was so different. I think that was cool. My background's DR, like just each podcast we hit and sign, we want to hit a certain ROAS. But to hear from Bayer, LifeLock, like where they have radio spends higher, and just their goals are different. So I think it was interesting to hear the KPIs differences across each brand and how each brand is looking at the audio space for a different reason. So I think that with the panel's name, Audio's Role in the Marketing Mix, I thought that was really cool to see what each brand. So that was it was more of a super informative panel for me to really see like what's going on outside of my specific type of brand. But really cool to listen into.
Yeah. And so that was the first panel. There were probably 3 or 4 different panels, and the other topics that we covered were at measurement, which usually means attribution. And, we did our surveys before, and everybody wanted to talk about attribution. We also talked about creative. We also talked about, what we were just talking about, which is audio's role in the mix, right? And the different ways that people use it. What's interesting from some of the survey data we got back, and we are going to be putting out the What Brands Want report, but just to establish the baseline of who was in the room, we probably saw 80 to 90% of that room their metric for success was something that was performance oriented. There were only about 2 responses that we saw where it was a brand or awareness KPI, which is good. We have to have space for both objectives, right? But whether it's, lower funnel or mid funnel lead gen or something like that, usually it's expected to be a result. And I feel like what's interesting about podcasting specifically, these are the brands that built the business. This is how the business got to $2 billion, was from companies that need to see a result on the other side of it. And so we really have to protect those that kind of poured the foundation and are still engaged and willing to participate. You'll notice there weren't that many large, like, Fortune 500 brand advertisers in the room, because this may be more of a box that they check, but the people that were there were deeply engaged and passionate. Okay, so in terms of the other panels, specifically measurement and creative, May, what jumped out to you from some of the voices that you heard?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the creative panel was very, very good. One of the things that stuck out, I believe one of the panelists said that when looking at your creative, you always want to take like a big swing, but make sure it's the right swing. And pretty much always having that room to test out your creative, right? We can set up the media strategy, we can set up how we want it to run or think it's gonna work, but the creative has to be on point. Like, it really makes up a big part of the campaign, because if the creative's not there, or if the creative is just not grabbing the consumer's attention, then the strategy is kind of out the window. So just having that creative aspect really stuck out to me. And going back to my creative team here, I was like, I can't wait to talk to them and see what other new ideas we can look at, or how we can refresh things or shake it up and start making those big swings as mentioned at the conference. So
that is so important. And, I can speak to this because we got it wrong so many times. I mean, we probably spent a decade really trying to get a good test and learn practice developed. And I think the big unlock for us was probably, first of all, pixels, because when we were doing vanity URL against vanity URL, the sample sizes of the data that we would get back, even if it was like a low ticket item that did high volume, it was always hard to trust that this was better than that, let alone, things like multivariate, right? But the second point is what you just said that we learned was, you can't bunt, you can't make it about the, changing 3 words in the 5th line of a 180 word script, right? You got to have something big that you're doing that's different if you want to feel a statistically significant impact. So I'm glad you brought that up. And it was heartening to see how many people among us are really dedicated to testing and learning and letting the data drive decisions, because creative historically can just be so subjective, right? So that's a great call out. Brynn, how about you?
Yeah, that was my panel. And I learned.
You did good. You guys had a good panel.
Thank you. Cassie, she made a comment, and I don't remember what the 2 C's were right off the top of my head. It was like, I think it was confidence and conviction when it came to developing a test. It was, do you have confidence that this is the right test, or like this, that this is what you want to test, and do you have the conviction that this is the right way to do it? It was something along those lines. And that really stuck out to me clearly, because I remember it, exactly.
Yeah. Well, but I think those are important points, whatever the, the acronym actually was.
Yeah.
Like, the parameters that you use are so critical. And if you're not tight with the parameters up front, the worst thing in the world happens. You have inconclusive results. And how discouraging is it when you take the time and you spend a little money to try to line something up, and then you go, oh, I didn't actually learn anything. So being confident in those parameters is super critical, and it has to be clear.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Cassie also made that point, saying, it's one thing to say, okay, this test one, or this copy outperformed this other copy. But if you don't know why, then you didn't really learn anything from your test. And so understanding what changes you made and why they worked is more important than making the change.
Yeah, it's tricky. And we've tried to create templates so that when we go into a test, we start out with a hypothesis and we set the parameters. We try to document as many of the steps as possible in that process and try to do some version of the scientific method. But it's really easy to skip that stuff. And you don't run your first ad or sign up for a campaign and then get the textbook on how to do this stuff, right? So we're all kind of just making up our own way. But I think the more we talk and the more we collaborate, the more we can start to have more standard practices for this sort of thing. But I think the tech is catching up to where it's getting a little bit easier to do. James, anything from the creative or the measurement panel that was meaningful to you?
I think on the measurement panel, I was not in my seat during that one. I was walking around to take care of something for the next piece, but I happened to see everyone taking copious notes during that panel. And
Dom got
so
12 pages, I heard.
Dom got 12 pages.
How
I
many
saw people
pages you
using
get,
the
Dom?
pages.
He's actually doing the formal recap for
I got some screenshots in there, but we're 15.
15
Nice.
pages.
Nice.
Yeah,
Impressive.
that's my biggest takeaway is that I know that we did a little questionnaire when people RSVP'd about what are you most looking to get out of this, and measurement was probably 95% of the responses from everyone. So I was glad to see everyone paying attention and asking questions and really listening and tuning in for that piece. So that's my biggest takeaway from the panels, was that hearing the different POVs from the different CAOs on stage, from Giles as our host, was good to see that. And I also heard that a lot of the CAOs were very relieved to see that they're not alone in those same type of challenges that they had. So that was a really positive light for me to see.
All right. I think I covered everybody on that topic, but did I get to Dom on that one?
I think I'd say like I agree. The creative panel was pretty cool. Just to hear about the different testing people are doing. Yeah, the Cassie point, Brynn, that's what I kind of came away with of. I thought that was hilarious talking about this test. We figured out a winner, didn't know why the hell it won. So what can we do? We can't really do anything from that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Just a good reminder for everyone to really have a set hypothesis. And then the measurement, yeah, just like called measurement untangling the knot. We didn't untangle the knot, but everyone's working hard together to do it. So everyone's kind of in the same spot, trying to figure out pixels, codes, vanity URLs, everything, multiple sources of truth. And but I think, yeah, like we were talking about 12 months ago, we were at a different spot. I think I confidently say we're closer to where we want to be, which is good. So progress is happening.
Yeah, hopefully we got a couple of the threads loosened up a little bit. It's more than a 1-day job to untangle, but we're in the process. Okay, so the next section, semi-awkward for me to ask you about because I did this like passionate brand safety presentation, but then also there was a tools section as well where I really talked about primarily one tool, but some of the history and challenges and reasons for the solution that we're getting behind in brand safety. And then Giles had the blessing of about 10 minutes on the clock and every other tool in the marketplace, which I thought he did a pretty good job on. But I'll leave it up to you guys if you want to comment on one or both, but I'd love to hear any feedback of anything that stood out from either of those sessions. And we can start with you, May.
Yeah, I would say that, and I'm trying to jog back my memory, but what's coming to mind is like when we were.
It'll be easier when you get Dom's recap.
Right, Dom, I need the recap. Like, no. But I'm going back to when we did, I think it was like the Seeker versus, jog my memory with the other company.
Well,
like,
it was the GARM framework.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the brand safety front, the long story short is that, we all kind of got behind and a lot of the tools started representing the 11 GARM components. And that's created a lot of recent controversy. And I think some of that controversy is warranted. So, we presented a new path.
Exactly. And I think when I saw that, that was like kind of I wanted to dig more deeper into that because I'm personally never have utilized Seeker. So I was very intrigued to like learn more about that product and then see the side by sides. And it was very interesting and like intriguing.
Yeah, so we got to introduce the civility score 12 months ago, but then in the 12 months following, like we worked with them as the team at Seeker has built out to full dashboard and functionality, and we just got the API for that, and it's amazing to watch it come into market and start to solve some of these problems. But I think the basic thesis that we're promoting is the idea that, look, the market doesn't really care about most of these variables, and the tools aren't really getting there. So if we can just simplify and make it about measuring personal attack in a show, you're going to root out a lot of, it's going to solve 90% of the brand safety problems that you're going to have. And that was kind of the workaround that we were able to find. And so we hope that it gets some traction, and it certainly has traction with us. Dom, from either that or the tool section, anything make its way onto your book?
Just, I think like the big takeaway from the tools section was just how we talk about audio just being such a big channel, and there's so many tools for it, and there's so many little things that I think I probably confidently say not a single brand is utilizing everything to the max capacity, and it'll take us a while to do so. And just hearing that, because I had never heard of quite a few of the tools, and really one of my goals is to go through and just see each phase and understand how it could potentially work and fit into the puzzle to get better. But that was probably the biggest takeaway. It was just, yeah, the tools organized for the campaign, like it's just a lot, but
it is a lot. It is a lot. We looked at some of you guys were very patient. We used a tool called Slido, which I'm not going to endorse, but we did use. And we did that to do real-time surveys. But when we give you the information, I think it may have been worth the struggle. Wildly overwhelming response from the market is that the tools you're using in audio are harder than what you're using in other advertising channels. And that seemed to be, it was almost a constant that our industry under indexes the rest in terms of, usability and how confident people are in the types of data that they're getting. And so educating people on what are the right tools and which are the new ones that you should be testing and all that, really, really important stuff. Brynn, anything to add on while we're still on tools?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, similar to the rest of you guys, was just that there's so much. And I was kind of like, I wonder how much work I'm doing that I don't need to be doing, that how much can I take off my plate by utilizing some of these? And I think that most people are probably in the same boat as me. We're not utilizing the tools to the best of our ability. We simply just don't know what all is out there and what it can do for us.
Yeah. And then, Dom, you referenced earlier the Oxford clock. So we gave a preview of a case study that we're going to be publishing in the next week or two, where we partnered with Podscribe and we looked at their data across close to 200 different brands. It was, they were all anonymized, so it doesn't even matter what the brands were, but what matters is the performance of the ads as ad loads increase in a podcast. Because when we started, depending on when you came into this business, but, when stamps.com put their first ad on, I don't know, Adam Carolla or something like that, this was like before electricity and smartphones. The clocks were that you had maybe a pre-roll, and then somebody'd hand Adam a piece of paper and he'd just work in the copy into the show, right? And you might get one mid-roll, and they started adding a few more over time. And then I remember in 2013, when we were really early, calling our rep and just being like, listen, we need more value. Can you create a unit and put it at the end of the show, and we'll just do a post roll as added value? And they did that. And we were getting free posts from everybody for a while. And then they started putting a price tag on it. But such is life. It's a moving target. But anyway, we wanted to follow this issue really closely. And what we found out was that performance starts to diminish when more than 6% of your time in a show is spent on advertising. And there's another cliff that kind of kicks in around the 10% range. So what we put forth that we're going to be presenting as a formal case study, we're kind of telling you a little early here, is what we're calling the Oxford clock, where we basically said, here is our ideal design of an hour. And you should start with a pre-roll, preferably an endorsed host-read pre-roll as a 60, but don't go crazy or everybody's going to start skipping. And then about a third of the way into the show, you get a mid-roll, preferably endorsed, but then you can have 230s or 160. And if you want to plug that into programmatic, great. You can put in produced ads. You do that again about 2/3 into the show. And at the end, you have another 60 that's endorsed. So if you don't make the audience wait more than 60 seconds after they've heard the voice of the host, we think that they'll be able to maintain the listener experience. You're not going to see a cliff by being the fourth ad in a break, which some of us are right now. So we're trying to promote that into the industry and say, like, let's agree on what a baseline is that we expect. And then as we look at our dashboards and our reports, we can correlate between ad performance and spot load, knowing that that should be a variable that affects CPM. So that was what was presented. Any reactions to that?
That was the single biggest takeaway of the whole.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it was something that I really just haven't thought that much about before. You know, where is my my brand's share of voice in an episode, where my ad is falling in an ad break? You know, it's just not something that I'm thinking about as one of the first reasons why my ad might not be performing very well. I'm thinking about copy, or I'm thinking about so many other things. And that really struck a chord for me, because I was like, wow, this could be the source of a lot of my problems.
Yeah, well, and that's what's been amazing about it. The further we go, you know, it used to be a very binary industry of, we bought this show for this price and it was a pre or a mid, right? And it was going to be a live read no matter what, right? But as it evolves, all these other media metrics, where you land in the break, how long is the unit, all these types of things start coming into play, and our dashboards start getting a little more complicated, and pricing gets a little more complicated. But you know what? This is reality, and we have to adapt to it. So glad to hear that was helpful, and it'll be encouraging for Giles to hear that as well, because he put a lot of his life into that case study. So did Pete and the team. So, all right. We've covered most of the content at this point. We also had two other guests. We had Maïm Bialik, who, you know, is a wonderful talent and has done so many things in media. From, you know, she was in Beaches in like the 80s, and had her own TV show in the 90s, and Jeopardy, and books, and PhD, and neuroscience. I mean, all this stuff. And then she came and shared why she's doing a show that's primarily focused on mental health. And then we had a wonderful after party. No, it wasn't the after party. Before the after party, we had a party, and this was our big people event for people to just enjoy themselves. And I interrupted that by doing a little fireside chat with Paul Scheer. I'll share one note that I thought was impactful for the business that came from Paul, and we talked about it a little bit. And I know that the sound was a little bit tricky in that environment, but what I got from Paul that I thought was worth mentioning was this idea of duration. He's like, you know, the longer a host has been running a show, they may have the same number of listeners as another show, but if I've been doing this for 14 years and somebody has been doing this for 14 episodes, the trust that the audience probably has in me is going to carry forward into the advertising impact. And I never considered that before, but I think there could be a real monetary value in that. And I got a screenshot from Podscribe after the event that they're already starting to build that metric into their platform, which was really cool to see. So we can start to, you know, look at that as one more point of information as we're making decisions. So so that was really the full content of the event. And, you know, I know we're about out of time, so I'm just going to go around one last time and just say anything you got from those sessions, or anything else that if you were telling somebody that wanted to be there but couldn't be, that they should know that you took out of that could be useful to them. So Brynn, I'll ask you to kick off.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Paul's and your talk. It was very funny. He called out stamps too. So I was excited.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know since we're finishing up, I think just the event as a whole, it was wonderful, Dan. And thank you so much for putting it all together and inviting me. And it was, I think if I would describe it to anybody, it was like being at camp, right? We took the bus to get there, and the panel all day, their panels all day. I loved the way that was formatted. It felt like it was a really good use of my day. And then we had a great party afterwards. And yeah, it felt like summer camp.
I love that. Maybe we should
CAO
maybe it
camp.
shouldn't be the summit. It'll be CAO camp. Yeah. Camp CAO. There you go. All right. How about you, May?
Yeah, I'll say the event was definitely one for the books. The quote from the event, I said, we worked hard, but we played a little harder at the end as well. I
you for
would
that.
say, like, if you've never been to the summit, definitely try to get a seat in the room or come out. I truly enjoyed it. I hope you guys let me come back. But no, I definitely walked away with a lot of additional knowledge, and it was fun just meeting new people, seeing old friends, and then also just, like I said, gaining that knowledge and getting more allies in the industry and knowing that I'm not the only one out here having those struggles with audio. So
Love that. Dom, you want to take the last word?
Yeah, I'll just keep it simple, people. Like I don't work with you guys, Dan, at Oxford, but I might in a year, I might in 5 years. We might all work together at different places. So just the connections with Oxford, you guys are awesome, and just different brands too. I've made connections, friends in the last year at both events. So that's my favorite part. Camp is a great way to put it, Brynn.
Well, I appreciate you guys saying all that, and I'm happy that you retained, some of the pieces that everybody shared, and we don't have a CAO summit if you guys don't show up. So, really appreciate the time that you took to do that, and to do this. And I think, look, at the end of the day, relationships is the whole thing, and I know in my career, I don't think I'd been able to do anything that, that I'm proud of or benefiting from today if there weren't relationships behind it that have lasted a long, long time. And so I think we're all playing a long game here. And I do watch the market, people change places, but generally once you get the audio bug, you kind of stay close to it. And so I expect that we're all going to be doing something like this together, for decades to come. So really, really grateful to have you guys on board for it. And I should thank our sponsors because, they paid the bills and they didn't ask for programming. Spotify hosted us. You would think that they would not want us going towards certain topics. Not everything looks great for them. They don't put restrictions on us. They just let us use their space, have this forum, and they're not even allowed to pitch while they're there. Right. So we are really grateful to our sponsors making this possible. And that's Spotify, Seeker, SiriusXM had a great after party, sponsored by Q Code, Odyssey, PMM, and David Raphael came out. So a lot of folks got behind this thing and made it possible. So I just want to say thank you again, and thank you for joining the Media Roundtable. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in audio and to use your influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but edify and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. If you're a marketer looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road. Just go to oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. If you have feedback so we can do a better podcast, feedback is the breakfast of champions. Email us, info@mediaroundtable.com. Don't forget, we also have a wonderful creative podcast that we do hosted by Stu Redwine called Ad Infinitum. It is all about audio creative. So if you're really in the weeds, you'll dig that. And special thanks to our guests, as well as Bianca, Kyle, Haley, Ezra, Mary Jane, Everett, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.